Hi there, Grand Design owners. Today in your 2021 Grand Design Imagine, we're going to be showing you how to upgrade the suspension hardware to lubricatable wet bolts. We're using Dexter's single axle kit, and if you use this kit on a tandem axle trailer like this, you can purchase two of this kit because you'll get just about everything you need, as one kit's just about every bolt for one side. If you are doing it like this though, you will need one additional wet bolt to perform everything on this side, which you can purchase here at eTrailer as well. And this is what our wet bolt kit looks like when it's installed. You're going to receive two shackles in the kit, as well as two additional wet bolts and 4 bushings. That's enough to take care of replacing the bushings for 2 leaf springs, as well as replacing 2 shackles. This kit's great if you have a single axle trailer and you want to do both sides of that trailer, or if you have a tandem axle trailer and you just need to do repairs on one side, you get just about everything you need for one side on a tandem axle. Having wet bolts is a great upgrade because it allows you to lubricate the moving sections where metal and metal do potentially contact each other if they're dry. Being able to lubricate them ensures that we've got a barrier between them, so that way there is no metal on metal contact that's going to wear down our components and create play, which will further on down the line end up in more broken components as well as a noisy and very wobbly trailer. We used this kit to install our road armor equalizers. We used one on each side, and we've got everything we needed here to get it installed except for the bolt here at the top for where it attaches our equalizer to the trailer. You can get single quantities of wet bolts here at eTrailer, so if you need, you can go ahead and add one to your cart. We'll begin our installation by lifting our trailer and then removing the wheels. Now we have a lift here at eTrailer, but at home you can just use some floor jacks to do it. You want to make sure you lift it up and support it underneath the frame with jack stands. Once you've got your wheels off the ground, we'll then remove our lug nuts. We're using a 3/4 socket to do so. Once all the lug nuts are removed, we can take our wheels off and set them aside. You'll then want to prepare a jack and jack stands underneath the axle. Now, it doesn't need to be on there very tight. It's just there really mainly for support. So we want it to just be underneath there to where it still kind of moves around just like that. Put our jacks under one, and then we'll put our jack under the other. And we're just going until it touches. It's just to prevent it from falling down while we're working. Then we're going to need to be able to move it to get our parts out and the new parts in. So now that we've got that all prepared, we can head underneath on the inside and start removing the nuts. We're going to use an 11/16 socket to remove the nuts off of each of our bolts. You'll have one at each end of your leaf spring for each leaf spring, as well as 3 for your equalizer. So now that they're all loose, we can start removing our hardware. You may or may not need to raise your axle up and down slightly in order to get these out. Sometimes they just pull right out like that. Sometimes they're in a little bit of a bind, and if they are, you have to move your jack a little bit to be able to get them out. So now that we got those removed, we'll remove our equalizer bolt in the middle, and we're going to do that on the inside underneath by driving it out with a hammer. One of the things I like to do when driving this out, and whenever you're driving out any of your bolts here for your suspension, I like to take the nut that we had previously removed, and I'll thread it back on a few threads. And that way, when we go to drive it out, we're not going to damage the threads of the bolt. We're not going to be reusing them or replacing them with wet bolts, but it's always just good practice in case you need to reuse the bolt. Once you get it to move like that, you've done most of the work already, so it drives out very easily at this point. So you can remove the nut and just tap it one more time, and it'll just pull out of there. And if we look at our leaf spring here, the bushing that's located in the eyelet here on the end has split. This bushing is damaged, so going back together, we're really doing a disservice by not repairing this, because once this bushing goes, our bolt then is going to start wearing into our leaf spring. It's just going to cause more and more damage. So with our wet bolt kit that we're using to replace our standard bolts, we're going to also get bushings included with them for our leaf springs, so that way we can replace those out as well. To remove these, what I like to use is a socket that's of a similar size. You could also use your old bolt, because you can see there's a shoulder on it. So you could use the shoulder to drive it out. However, these metal ones are pretty tight in there, so I highly recommend using a close size socket to drive it out. So we're using an 11mm socket here. Now the size of socket you're going to use is going to vary depending on the manufacturer of your socket, but we're looking for something that's a similar size as our bushing but slightly smaller so that way we can drive it through. And we're just lining it up and we're just going to punch it on out. These are in here pretty tight, so expect to be hammering a little bit to get them out. And you can see it started to move there. And we're just going to keep on driving until it pops out the other side. And then if your socket does get a little stuck, you can take one of your old bolts, put it back in there, and then tap it back out. Now when you go to put your new bushings in, I recommend a little bit of spray lubricant first. That'll help it slide in there easier. And then we want to make sure when we drive it in, we don't damage up our new bushing. You don't want to strike directly on the bushing. It's a copper brass-like material, so it's a lot softer than any of the other surrounding metals in your hammer. So what we can do is we can use just any old bolt. This is just the one that we had laying around the shop here. We're just trying to choose one that has a head that is the right side that'll slide right in our bushing. That way this bolt will go in. If you have one long enough to where it comes out the other side, that's even better, because then you can hold the bolt when you're hammering it. But if you have a short one, that's fine, as long as it gives you full coverage all the way around the head of the bushing there. So we can strike right on the head of the bolt and then just drive it in. And this is where having that slightly longer bolt's nice. So when you hit it there, you can hold the other side to prevent it from bouncing back out with each strike. We're just going to drive it in now. And then we'll do the same thing for any of the remaining eyelets. We're now ready to put our new equalizer in. If we look at the equalizer, it already has bushings in it that are pre-installed, so we don't need to worry about any of the bushings on our new equalizer. The road armor is going to face out. This bolt goes at the top, and we're going to be using wet bolts for all of our locations, and that's really important for any equalizer that has metal bushings like this, because the lubrication is going to ensure long-lasting operation. It's going to be a lot smoother, and these are going to last significantly longer than many of the other styles out there if you maintain proper greasing on all of your bushings. So you also have an option of putting your wet bolts in from the outside in like this, or from the other direction, just whichever one's easier for you to get to the grease fitting. In a lot of cases, if you put the bolt in the other direction to where it's on the inside, you can easily get underneath the trailer and grease all the bushings. If you put them on the outside like this, it just depends on your particular setup whether or not you're going to be able to grease it when the tires are installed. Now, I already checked that out on this one, and the tires don't really interfere too much, so we can go ahead and put all of our Zerks facing out on this one here. So we're going to go ahead and take the equalizer now. We're going to put it in place. We're going to take our bolt, we're going to slide it all the way through till it goes to the other side, and then we'll use one of the included nuts that came in the kit to secure it on there. And we don't need it to be tight right now, we're just making sure it's held in place to hang it up there for us. And now we can install our shackles. And these also have heavy duty shackles there. You can see those in comparison with the factory ones. So these are going to last much longer. These are going to slide from the outside through, and again, you can go the other way if you wanted the grease fittings to be on the other side. Just like that. On the other side, we're going to take the shackle that comes included, and then we'll thread on the nuts that came included with our wet bolt kit. We'll repeat that for all of the hardware that we had slid through. And we did the eyelets all the same. Now that we've got all the hardware in and loosely installed, we just need to go back and tighten down our bolts. We're going to use the same size socket as before. Just run it down. All the bolts are serrated, and you want to make sure that they're drawn fully in. You can see the top one here is not drawn all the way in yet. And the serrated keeps it from spinning, so you won't need a wrench on the other side. And just check that gap, make sure that it does draw it all the way in. We can then go back and torque our hardware to the manufacturer's specifications. If you upgraded to wet bolts, you'll want to make sure you use the torque specs for your wet bolts included with those instructions. Now that we've got everything replaced, all that's left is if you did do an upgrade to wet bolts, which I highly recommend for Lippert's road armor due to the type of bushings they have, you'll want to make sure you grease them. We're just using some wheel bearing grease. We're using marine grease because it is a more protective grease than regular red wheel bearing grease. You can get some here at eTrailer, and you can get a grease gun here as well if you need one to grease everything up. When greasing them, you'll just want to pump it in until you start to see grease come between the bushing and your shackles or wherever the hardware is that's bolted in. You can see it just starting to come out right there. And that's all we need in there. We'll move on to the next one and repeat until they're all greased. Now that we've got everything greased, we can perform the exact same procedures over on the other side to get the equalizer and hardware installed over there. Once you're over there, you'll grease it up, and then you can just reinstall your wheels, put her back on the ground, make sure you torque them to your trailer specifications, and then you're ready to hit the road. And that completes our installation of Dexter's wet bolt kit